Hey, YoProno audience, it's Camber here. Before we dive into this week's interview, I want to tell you about Wallaco, Way of Life Athletic Company. We interviewed Lindley Shaw a couple of months ago, and she graciously extended an invitation to be one of their community partners. And so, I want to tell you quickly about Wallaco. It's athletic wear, it's comfortable, it's efficient, and at the YoProno, we're all about telling you what you can do to be more efficient in your everyday life. So, I'm obviously a big fan of wearing athletic wear, especially right now in the pandemic when I'm working from home. Of course, when I'm not on important Zoom meetings, but wanted to share that as a YoProno audience member, you do have access to a discount at Wallaco. So take a look at the notes below and see how you can take advantage of that. Now to the YoProno of the week. Hey everyone, this is Camber here with the YoProno. Thank you for joining us today. We have Aidan Heintzman, 26-year-old CEO of Hello Earth based in New York. He is actually a connection of Naomi, who we interviewed a couple of months ago. And so we're very excited to have you with us today, Aidan.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about your background. So give us just a quick recap on where you're from originally, where you currently are, and then we'll dive into the details throughout the interview.
Perfect. So my background's actually a little bit complicated or busy. I was born in Ottawa, Canada. In 1999, on February 13th, my dad was working for IBM. They moved him down to the headquarters in New York. So we first moved to Ridgefield, Connecticut. Then 2 years later, in 2002, we moved to Pleasantville, New York, and that's where I grew up and spent most of my childhood. After Pleasantville, for university, since I'm Canadian, I went back to Canada because university is much cheaper for Canadians in Canada. So I lived in Vancouver for about 1 year and went to the University of British Columbia. But I quickly realized that I wasn't actually going to class, and I spent most of my time doing my own research besides skiing. And Vancouver just wasn't the city for me. And so at that time, my dad was back in Toronto with his family. He was the COO of a tech company out there, and he told me to check out the kind of entrepreneurial space in Toronto. And so I left university and I moved to Toronto back in 2014. So that's kind of where I've came from. And I was in Toronto for about 5 or 6 years before going to LA and then New York, where I'm settled now.
Great. All right. Well, that's a great recap. So thank you. Now tell us what you're doing today. You're the CEO of Hello Earth. What is Hello Earth? How did you get to this point? Tell us that.
So Hello Earth is a venture studio where we create our family of social impact-based consumer brands. We also invest into brands that tackle social or environmental problems. And then through our studio, we're able to go and help the investments that we do make, help them scale and kind of grow to the next point. That all started, it's been about a 5 or 6 year journey now, just taking one step at a time. But it was January 5th of 2015. I was walking at the corner of Yonge and Dundas in Toronto, and I came across a homeless man that he didn't wake up. He was 61 years old. His name was Marhum. He was sleeping at the bus station, and it was negative 18 degrees out that night. And I saw his body being taken away. And this kind of had this profound impact on me where I started to really question, where did we go wrong as his neighbors, his fellow Canadians, to not interject into his life at some point and get him onto a different path? And so I was 20, 19, 20, and I just left university, and I was kind of in this place of not really knowing what the purpose of life was in reality, right? We're born, we live, and then we die. And so but you have a start date and an end date, and in between there's a dash, and it's what you do in that dash that defines your life. And so I kind of really started to think, if the purpose of life is to be happy, then in order to feel the most fulfilled throughout your life, when you kind of look back on it, then being happy and creating as much happiness as possible for other people is the way to do that. And so at that time, I started a nonprofit around winter support for the homeless, and that quickly transitioned to a nonprofit supporting homeless and at-risk youth because we had no money, but we had a lot of time, and there's a lot of young people around us that had a lot of time as well. And so we realized that if we wanted to make an impact in the homeless space, doing that with homeless and at-risk youth was the best way to do that. And so we started this nonprofit and grew to about 25 people looking to empower and employ homeless and at-risk youth. And then I wanted to, about 2 years later, I wanted to start understanding how a dollar could be extended to have the most impact, because we already stood how a minute could, where the simplest things can often solve the most complex problems. And that's when I got into the consumer brand space, specifically social impact-based companies that have a one-for-one model. So every single purchase a consumer makes has a direct, understandable impact. But the exciting thing for us wasn't the impact itself, whereas the brand scales, the impact scales, but it's the conversation that those brands are able to have with the customers. As the brand's voice grows, the conversation grows, and you can implement real change in the world if you're able to facilitate a conversation around understanding. And so that's what kind of got me onto the path of where Hello Earth is. We quickly started to understand that the best thing that we could do, if we wanted to make our time the non-factor in being able to leave good in the world, is to make sure we remove our time. So how do we create the infrastructure that allows or enables other people to create success? And that's where this studio model came about, where if we come across a problem, we're able to create a brand based on market opportunities and donate and support that problem. If we come across a brand that's tackling really fantastic problems and we see that we have the ability to help them, then we can invest in that brand and put them through our network and our resources and put our teams towards helping what they're doing. And then finally, if we come across a cause or a group of people working on a cause that we're really passionate around, through our foundation, through the teams that we put together, we're able to help them create their story, share their story, and increase their donations. And then through that foundation as well, we're able to bring in a lot of our brands that we work with outside of our own family of brands. And they start adopting one-for-one models, donating to the different charities that we support.
Wow. I want to stop you there because you just unpacked a lot. The fact that this really all started because you were, walking past a homeless man, essentially. I mean, that was kind of where the idea started. I just think that's amazing. The fact that you were so young too at the time, and you are still so young, you're 26. That is really impressive. And I have so many follow-up questions, but just want to, commend you for what you've done, because it's really great. And one of the reasons I love interviewing people, to show again that it's not, when you go back, when you think of college or university and you think, I know that when I got there, you think that there's 5 different paths for you. And that's it. That's all that's laid out. But it's very clear that just by every story and every person I talk to, especially, when you hear something like yours, that there are so many different paths that you can take. And it might just come back to, an idea that you had when you were walking on the street. So again, don't want to stop the flow of the interview, but I just really commend you for what you've done.
You're absolutely right. When it comes to university is usually just the next step that most people take in their life. But when I got there, I grew up listening to my father speak of the stories that he went through during his days, and they were amazing, right? The professors that he met, the university kids that he went to school with, and what they're doing now, they're incredible individuals, and his time and his stories were amazing. And then when I got to school, I just didn't feel any of that. I wasn't excited by my classmates or excited by my professors. They just seemed like career professors, and the people that I wanted to talk to were just outside of the classroom. And so I started to talk to those people. And then day after day, you just kind of have to take the next day as it comes, right? You don't need to know what you need to do with your entire life. You just need to know what you want to do tomorrow. And as long as you do it kind of every day, then it's hard to not be happy.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great outlook and great comment to end that question. So thank you. Looking back at, your earlier years, what, if you could pick kind of one event that really makes complete sense why you're doing what you're doing now, what would it be? So obviously you mentioned that moment that we've already talked about, but looking back, was there any characteristics that you showed as a young kid, or, just kind of, you can answer that question however you'd like.
Interesting. So as a young kid, I never really felt like I fit in, because I was a Canadian growing up in an American school system. And I always kind of felt on the side, and every single day I was reminded that I was Canadian. So I started to get this profound love of being a Canadian because I was already reminded of it. But then it also made me feel like I was kind of on the outside. So I was always watching from the outside. And then, when when I was young, I wanted all my friends had dirt bikes, and I loved bicycles. I wanted a motorcycle, I wanted a dirt bike, but my parents wouldn't let me have one. And so what I did was for Christmas for my mom, I asked her to buy me this engine I found on eBay, and for my dad, I asked him to buy me a frame, and then for my birthday, I asked for forks from my mom because they were separated, right? And so then my dad bought me wheels, and then I saved some money mowing a lawn, and I purchased brakes and some cables, and ended up building myself a motorcycle. It was called a Honda CT70 when I was 13. And I loved doing that. And so putting together pieces that I find and to create something that makes me happy is kind of what I always like to focus on. But talking about that kind of one moment that kind of reinforced everything. About a year and a half into the nonprofit around homeless and winter support, we were doing this program at Toronto Island where we brought some of our Olympic volleyball friends. The restaurant on Toronto Island, donated a lunch to us. We brought 25 kids from the local homeless shelter, a bunch of our university friends, and we just did a day of volleyball, barbecue, lemonade, laughter. And at the end of the day, the 16-year-old girl came up to my partner and I, and she said, "I need to say thank you." My partner goes, no, you don't need to thank us, right? We're doing this because we want to. And she goes, no, you don't understand. When you wake up every single day and you feel like you have nothing to offer the world, but you take something every single day, you feel like you shouldn't be a part of the world. And this morning I wanted to kill myself, but the warm memories from today make me want to fight a little bit longer. And then she just walked away. And we didn't spend any money on that day. A handful of people gave some time. And all we did was we exposed these kids to new experiences. And that had this profound impact on me where became abundantly clear that we always try to solve problems with very complex solutions. But often the best thing we can do is something so simplistic we overlook it. And that started kind of becoming this guiding force in my day-to-day and how we look at things is what is the most simplistic things that we can do so we can do more of it that have these complicated ripples that we can't quite see as time goes on.
Absolutely. Wow. You're a good storyteller. I can tell.
Thank you.
I'm very captivated. So going back to Hello Earth, can you give us some examples of who some of these, investors are, or some of your, what's the word I'm looking for? Some of the, I guess, the impact that you can make. Can you give specific examples, or is that not possible?
So I can give some examples. So if we look at it, there's kind of three different things that we do. We create and build our own brands, as well as help others build brands. We can invest into brands, and then we can leverage our resources and our partners to go and support the different charities that we come across. So through our foundation, we have three different teams. One team is a group of about 35 cinematographers, producers, directors, where we're able to, and these individuals they're award-winning. They work with Nike and Facebook and Mercedes-Benz. They're award-winning documentary filmmakers, and they really want to use their storytelling abilities to help tell important stories for the world. And so they're all pro bono, and they'll work on any project that we kind of bring up. We then have a team of about 12 illustrators and web designers that then can create a place for the individuals that we come across to share their stories. And then through a network of public relations, celebrities, influencers, we can then help put a voice to that story. And so we're working on a couple different projects through our foundation, one being a figure skating alliance, where about 40 or 50 of the world's top figure skaters are coming together and creating this new foundation around access to not just figure skating, but ice hockey skating in general, through kind of low marginalized demographics, and creating a greater access to skating because skating is so expensive. And so that's what they want to do. And so we're helping them launch their foundation through some of our law partners. And then our team's coming in and we're helping them kind of put together their story so they can go and raise more money and create partnerships. And they're doing a partnership with the LA Kings at their facility in Los Angeles. And, marginalized youth from across the Los Angeles, California area will be able to come and do skating programs with Olympians and pro NFL players inside the Los Angeles Kings arena, right? Which can create, that one small memory can create years of ambition. And so that's kind of like one of the ways that our foundation is working. And then on the brand side, for the next 3 or 4 months, we can't quite talk about some of the brands that we're working on, but we're doing a really exciting investment into a brand that's kind of disrupting the pharmaceutical space. And so it's all kind of plant-based pharmaceuticals.
Very cool. Thank you. I think our listeners will really like to have, some kind of tangible idea of what who you are working with all the time, and so I
Yeah,
think it's very helpful. And we'll certainly at the end of the interview we'll make sure we, let you tell everyone how they can find you, because I think this is
of
really
course.
exciting work you're doing. And I am mindful of our time, so I'm going to ask a few more questions.
Okay.
One of the things I always like to ask people that I interview is, what has been a hardship for you? I mean, you're a very young CEO. I would imagine you've probably had some hardships. Or I've had people who, have told me before, I really have been pretty lucky and I haven't. And I'm like, you're lying. But I think that's a really valuable question, because people want to know, what are the hardships that, they might face.
Hmm. No, you're absolutely right. When I look at myself, I completely understand and know that I come from so much privilege compared to most other people, from my family background, and from the support that my family has. And we aren't struggling. And I've never had to, as a growing up, I never had to worry about housing or food or not being able to play on a soccer team or go mountain biking or go skiing. I had all that. So that was I'm so fortunate, lucky to have had that. When I look back on it though, I had a very busy childhood, right? I've moved 16 times in my life. I was homeschooled in Connecticut up until second grade. Um, and when I look back at it, it was quite lonely for many years. When I was young, I remember really feeling this desire to connect with other kids, um, and I think that that actually has led to some of the attributes that I care most about myself, which is I became really good at listening because I was always observing other kids because I was always in the outside. And so I became really good at listening. And then I also really understood how powerful community really is, right? And especially in the business world of 2020, relationships are everything, right? Building out your community, the more people you know, the more you're able to do across your entire life, both personally and professionally. We are always stronger together. And if you can support as many people as you possibly can, they're going to support you back. And because I came from a place where I didn't really have that community, and I always kind of was desiring it as a young kid. When I found myself going into my teens and early adulthood, I really always kept looking for that community and putting a lot of time and energy into upkeeping those kind of memories of the community, and making sure that they know that I'm always thinking about them and staying relevant. And it pays off in ways that you can't quite comprehend. But I think it's really important to make sure that your community knows that you care about them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. My last question for you today, Aiden, is, where is our, environment heading? Social environment, just the general environment around us. Where is it heading? Are there people like you doing what you're doing?
I'm every single week now, I'm introduced to more and more people in the space doing something, and they're all banding together and doing amazing things. I recently was introduced to this gentleman that we might work together. His family's done over $4 billion of infrastructure investment with General Electric. They did solar investment, and the projects that they're working on are incredible. They're building a $1 billion project where they're creating these 50 factories. Any single food produce that is waste from a grocery store, they'll take for free. They turn it into carbon negative animal feed. And the world's not going to go vegan for a very long time. How do we take the environmental impact of the meat industry and make it zero? So they're introducing the world's first completely carbon neutral chicken products. And then they'll be expanding their offering because companies like Tyson can now have carbon negative feed within their supply chain. They're developing this technology that essentially connects to coal mines and coal plants, and it can capture the carbon, the release by the coal, store it into a limestone-like substance, and then they can turn it into a concrete because concrete uses a lot of carbon. And so they have their first product is this carbon negative concrete that they can offer for about 20% less than the current market rates. So there are very smart people doing some amazing things, but COVID has been this terrible impact on the entire world, but it's also been this awakening. You have
Yeah.
everyone finding themselves with more time, and they're listening and they're caring and they're talking about it. Um, so when we do find ourselves kind of coming out of this hibernation that we're in right now, I think that more and more people are going to be cognizant around in an exciting way, more cognizant around what their daily activities do towards impacting people around them as well as our planet. What every single product that they buy, they're going to put a little bit more time into understanding the sustainability, not just whatever the company says, but actually looking into it. People will go and do their homework on brands that they decide to support. And I think there's going to be this massive reorganization of talent across multiple industries, right? If you're doing something interesting and good for people or the world, it is the best time to start building out your team right now, or even if you have an idea, to start talking to people, because the best talent at the world, whether at their Facebook or Amazon, or just a 50-person startup, you can bring them onto your team now, and they're willing to take risks and help, because most people are starting to realize that they want to do more with their life than to just go to work, go to a bar after work with friends, have a pint, have some food, go to bed, repeat. Like, people want to live now.
Well,
So
that
I
gives
think
me
we're going to,
hope, and I hope that gives other people hope what is to come. And I love your point about COVID being an awakening, because I think
yeah,
it is certainly a societal awakening, but I think just individually,
absolutely.
everyone, I mean, myself included, I feel like I've learned a lot about myself during this time and our world, and you do want to make it a better place. So I really, again, am very honored to, be able to interview somebody like you who's doing what you're doing, because it's going to be, we're the future leaders. Young professionals are the future leaders
Yep,
of our world. And so, we have to stick together and prepare other people, and, spread this message across. So I really appreciate your time
absolutely.
today. And I guess I'll end on a fun note. So is this your background all the time for your COVID like for your Zoom meetings? I always like to ask people, how do you choose that background?
My desk is here. This is the back of the living room. It's the background depending on the week. I was in New
Yep.
York last week, so it just kind of depends. But as of right now, this is the background.
Very nice.
It's
Well,
the fireplace or the blank wall. So.
yeah, no, it's very nice. Just had to ask. But Aiden, how can people find you? How can people find Hello Earth?
So on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just search Aidan Heintzman. That's also my Instagram. My email is aiden@byhello.earth. And I'm happy to talk to anyone.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time today, and we will also include your links and your tags in your video interview. So happy to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me.